So I'm going to do this in little increments, and what I'm actually doing is I'm sort of like forming a little bit of a notebook, and then so when I've got all my ducks in a row, we'll kind of have a look at it. So a lot of people have been sending me this stuff from Counterspin about supposedly the shooting in Christchurch is all fabricated. Now I haven't read the whole bit of material, but we will get into it in the time. But what I've already seen from the preliminaries of what I looked at is there's a couple of red flags there, because first of all he makes this a big deal out about this car with a number plate that was parked out the front. Now I'll give Mr. Alps a concession. One of the things that always found me very interesting, and if we're talking about the same little silver vehicle, is that the driver at one point, or the shooter at one point, points his rifle at the vehicle, but he doesn't fire, and the vehicle's allowed to drive off. Now, there is a lot in that, but what I can tell you is that I do have the identity of who owned that car, what businesses they have, and again, when the time's right, we'll reveal that, because there isn't, in my investigation, any great hurry to... and well, let me put this out of the way. If you're going to do it properly and get your ducks in a row. So that's the first issue, is that actually he's trying to make out this car as a big mystery. It's not. Then we talk about the forensics guy. Now, I've never actually heard of him. I looked him up on the social media profile, and he apparently is a forensic digital expert for the Auckland City Council. Nothing else. No LinkedIn profile, no other material out there. So I'm kind of going, well, okay, where are your references? What is who are your client, or what have you actually worked on? Doesn't seem to be a person who has any really great standing in the forensic world. And more importantly, his background is in digital. What he's trying to make claims about regarding the weapons is a forensic matter, so I'd really like to hear somebody with a forensic qualification talking about the recoil. There is another issue. There is an issue there, because, and again, I will concede Mr. Alps a point at this particular time, that when you actually cross the road to across the Hagley Park, what you have is about 1, 2, 3 rows of oak trees. And now, my own experience is that I actually, when I was about 14, sort of running to school, somebody took a shot at me with a BB gun, and just nothing major, just like probably another teenager being a teenager. But what got me was that it sort of took a chunk of wood off the tree. So when the Christchurch shooting took place, one of the things that I always found very interesting, and I think anybody wants to go and examine this stuff today, it would be kind of probably worthwhile, is I couldn't find any ballistic damage on those trees across the road. 3 trees, and the guy managed to fire through basically a large tall fence across the road, 3 trees, and didn't manage to clip any rounds basically there, which I think is interesting. And again, probably would be really interesting to have a quick, closer examination of the frame by frame of what he's actually doing and where the pistol's been fired and what it's fired, and then you can probably work out trajectory. For the record, by the way, one of my jobs in the Army Reserves for 6 years was artillery intelligence, which is basically, my job is to find out who's shooting us with what, and pretty much all weapons, whether they're a BB gun or atomic weapon, work on the same similar principles. So on that note, the idea that there's no recoil and it's a softball gun, I don't think she really buy all that too much. That doesn't really swing me that much, because yeah, I've picked up weapons beforehand, M16s, Steyrs, grenade launchers, and they actually don't have often the big kick that you expect in the movies, not until you start to go up to high level calibers of weapons. I mean, they are actually designed for small asses like me to carry, and the days of the big recoils with SLRs, that's the thing of the past. So yeah, that's the best you've got. I think you need to come up with a bit more. The other thing is that he makes a couple statements about guns appearing and guns not appearing. Well, I actually think that's actually not correct, because I think in the first statement, the shooter goes in for the first weapon and he discloses he drops a weapon. I believe he drops a weapon at one point. We'll go back and we'll do more forensics on this. So the frame, when you see it the second time, is the weapon that he's already dropped previously, which you haven't seen because of the angle the cameras have been held. So that's, to me, again, that's the best you've got. And of course, we've got to apply that versus just the simple common law sense, in that sense of that, you know, I've spoken to people that have actually prepared the bodies. I've spoken to the forensic nurse who, you know, made the remark about how a lot of these guys who have been shot in the arse. So it suggests that there were no real bullets being fired at all, and that's what Kelvyn Alps is saying, is probably nonsense. On the other hand, if we're getting to the idea that he's actually shooting at somebody, with a second weapon, and the second weapon, which I can never understand why the shooter went back to the vehicle and then came back. I mean, that takes up valuable time. And the second shooter, or the second weapon, I said there's no forensic, and it's interesting also because the forensic person that they bring in to do this is actually the same guy from Australia who did the Port Arthur shooting. So, you know, that to give credit, there is something odd there. But he was still up against a situation where he's trying to say that it's all actors and it didn't actually happen. And if that's what he's saying, no, I don't agree. On the other hand, and I just say this very, very, very loosely, we turn around and say, what is a possibility, using the Sherlock analogy of when all probabilities are exhausted, doesn't matter how improbable it seems, it's basically going to be the only thing that actually is going to be the answer, is that here the scenario is, what if actually we made to think that this is a mass shooting, but in actual fact it's actually targeting very much specific people, even to the point that maybe one was actually abducted. And now this is extreme. This is, I am fully admit, hands on heart, a conspiracy theory, but I am very, very interested to know about the Pacific people that were actually killed at the mosque, and how many of them had connections to Lincoln University scientific research, and to Air New Zealand in very sensitive parts of the aviation industry. If Mr. Alps never turns around and finds any interesting on that, I'd be very, very interested. Now, the next thing I'm also going to turn around and do next is I'm going to start going through, he says this has been peer reviewed. Now, what peer review means is that's when it's been reviewed by fellow professional forensic people, and that's people who have actually got recognised authorities. Now, I've yet to see the list of the people that have supposedly peer reviewed, so I will again give myself the benefit of the doubt until such time I've actually gone through the whole material and read it all actually, but I'm going to be very curious because I'll be vetting those as well. But so far what we've got is we've got a forensic specialist who really doesn't have any experience in firearms, making a claim about basically a gun not having recoil. And again, the other thing to take into account too, when that was actually being shot with a live stream, he was using a GoPro Hero 400, which has a really terrible history. Go and look it up online. They have a very terrible editing history, so anything that happens too quickly, it just merely kicks in the auto editing background. So basically you get things that suddenly looks like the person's got a shoe on, then they actually haven't got a shoe actually on, and it's just definitely the change in the color contrast, which has been adapted automatically by this AI system. And it's known for this. Again, it was set at a very, very low level so that he could record as much as possible, to have it on as live stream, and stuff. So that again deteriorates accordingly to the settings you have. The more you want, the less quality you're actually going to get. So again, I would have been more interested with Mr. Garrett's background to actually look at that from the viewpoint of what he has to say from it, knowing specifically. I mean, it's like, again, cameras, guns, they work on the same principle. They all have a different characteristics. So unless someone has given you a forensic outbreak based on the tool that they're using, which in this case is a GoPro 400, it doesn't really mean a lot. You've got to actually explain why you're seeing this in relation to the technology you're using, or as the case may be, firing. So again, it's one of the things I guess the thing they also bring out is the fact that why I'm very reluctant to kind of go along with anything that Mr. Alps says is that because my past, having worked with him, and like bear in mind that I was going to run an amendment for the RNZ party, but then he started saying things which just made me think you're either stupid or you're just basically are a racist, anti-Semitic. That was, and I made that very clear in a public letter in 2014, why I was parting company with him, basically because I'd been told that he said, oh no, he was, he'd realised that violence didn't work and he's rejecting all of that, and he wanted to work with a party where the people made the decision, which all seemed good enough. But then it became very clear that it wasn't the case, and then I also became very questionable about the source of where Mr. Alps was getting his money from, which was the mining industry. And bear in mind, with what's happening in New Zealand at the moment with things like ACT Party and New Zealand First, this is all about the Atlas Network. So then the second thing was that when the Christchurch shooting actually came about, he tried to kind of integrate himself into the investigation that I'd been asked to do with Vinnie Eastwood, and he did it first of all straight up, and then and I went, no, not really interested. With your background, you're the kiss of death to anything having your name anywhere near this. Thanks, but no thanks. Go away. So he kind of weaseled his way in through the back door for Vinnie, and again, it started off, the situation was, I asked Vinnie, because he said, oh, we're going to meet Kelvyn Alps at the airport. Bear in mind, this guy that's a former member of the National Front, he wants to meet me at Christchurch Airport, which has probably got the most CCTV cameras you can freaking imagine. And I'm like, Vinnie, are you nuts? And get down there, and I do a DD mount and get the hell out of there. And then he later turns around and says, oh, it must have been a different Kelvyn Alps, and denies it. And then it turns out, oh no, actually, even when he's denied it, he actually, sunk himself, because he said, well, actually, I think it was, he said, Vinnie Kelvyn was going to meet me, but then he couldn't make it. So to me, there was like, it quantified my decision to not work with Vinnie Eastwood, because I could no longer trust him. And I feel that anything involving somebody that is actually lying is not a good place to start with. And of course, the thing that also got me was that in the shooting, I don't believe that the Freemasons are necessarily the Illuminati of the New World Order, but they are a very good shell organisation. Take, for example, P2 in the 1980s in Italy show you for basically organisations to use as a recruitment or as an area to kind of like, do things under the cover. So Kelvyn Alps is a third generation Freemason, and I found a lot of that old boy connection, especially with the two guys that actually arrested Brenton Tarrant. And I've had since then have other connection run-ins with those families in their old boys network. And to me, there was a lot of things that was going on but we won't get into motive. But the point was that when the guy is trying to basically try and control your investigation from day one, then he comes from the same organisation of the people that are turning up on your radar quite frequently, that should be a warning light. So again, Kelvyn is really, really good at telling you a little bit of the truth, but enough to not actually explain this more. So let's get back to this issue of, is he saying that everybody in the mosque didn't die and get shot? Because that's absolutely nonsense. Or is he saying that actually one of the second weaponries may not have been a weapon? In which case, I am not convinced, but I am also willing to consider the fact that there are some very anomalies that do need to be addressed. However, I'm going to enjoy actually kind of going through Kelvyn's stuff, because he does take a lot of shortcuts, and it'll be interesting to see where he takes shortcuts, what stands up and what doesn't. And I think the answer is really the more and more things he shows that don't stand up, the more and more you have to question everything else. And I think that's kind of what the point is that if he can give you a few grains of truth, but also literal lots of lies that then can go out, it discredits the whole situation. Either way, very tricky character to operate with, and my advice is anyone wanting to go down that area, just, think a little bit, question out who is this supposed expert, who is this peer-reviewed material, what actually is that stacks up that forensic, how does he actually explain that in that report to actually demonstrate more than just, I think, it's an opinion, okay? There should be, Carl Sagan once turned around and said, extreme claims need extreme level of evidence, and if you don't have this in a situation, you're kind of setting yourself up to fail. And it's, again, very interesting, only a couple of little media organisations, mostly again largely wanting to peddle this Atlas kind of narrative, have actually bothered to cover the story. Everyone else is kind of pretty much not really impressed at the quality of what's been presented as hardcore evidence.